Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome over to our stream today. I'm so excited, per usual, to talk about all of the latest releases over at Marvel Comics this past week. There's so much interesting stuff going on from, new revelations regarding the Ultimate Comics series. We had some really stellar issues of X-Men and Avengers. But today, I actually want to go ahead and focus a little bit more on the latest issue of Venom War that came out. That was chapter 4 from Ivan Coelho as well as Al Ewing. That series has just been so spectacular. Al Ewing, as a writer, has been so ambitious with the Venom property and really opening it up to the world of science fiction. There's so many characters just wandering around that title, just twisted versions of Venom and some of his adversaries, and the really interesting Meridius, who's posed just such a fascinating threat throughout the Venom comic book tale. Learning about how Meridius was pulling the strings throughout previous issues of the series was so fascinating. I think Al Ewing did a great job hiding some of those lore reveals to really strengthen earlier chapters of the comic book series. Also, Ewing finally made good on some of the really interesting plot developments regarding the fantastic free comic book day issue that did such a great job seeding some of those elements, particularly involving Eddie's son Dylan throughout the comic book tale. And now we get this twisted version of his future self as well as the Codex fighting together. Also, there was a sort of premonition, a sort of prophecy in one of the most recent issues of, or not in the most recent issue, but in a previous issue. And I really think Ewing, as a writer, found a really interesting way to implement this and then keep the narrative going. I really can't imagine how many individual plot threads are just lingering around the core Venom series. Frankly, at some point, I really want to see, Marvel Comics or just somebody start adapting this material. I've been frustrated so far with what's been going on with the Venom films. I'm really happy to see them finally moving towards Null, but my goodness, the future of Venom really pertains mainly to, I think, how Al Ewing has been expanding the property. We not only have Eddie's son Dylan, we also have characters like Flash Thompson, who are currently working with the anti Venom symbiote. Plus, the character of Natasha Romanoff has a symbiote of her very own. I think this Venom series from Al Ewing is just so tremendous. It makes some of the other Venom stories from, previous creators seem a little bit retrograde, just to be completely honest, especially with what they're doing in film, television, and video games. Um, now I feel like we're getting at the point where Marvel's doing a better job at adapting stories from the past couple years, especially when you take a look at the most recent Thor film. But they're still not adapting the full scope and gravitas of some of these properties. We used to talk about film and television a lot more over on the channel, and I think one of the most important things I like to stress over and over again is that in order to have like a really solid comic book adaptation, I think for the most part it needs to be on television because those long form stories really provide just a great avenue to explore so many character relationships and plot dynamics. Comic books are so incredibly complicated. There's so many moving parts in the background that just trying to squeeze, some landmark story like Dark Phoenix in the realm of a 2-hour film is just next to impossible. And I don't think any of the current mediums have gotten it right. Thankfully, though, I think X-Men 97 is at least a step in the right direction for Marvel. I think adapting comic books more similarly to like anime or manga through like more adult oriented cartoons is absolutely the way to go. I sure wish we had more adaptations that were similar to that. I don't think the Friendly Neighborhood Spider Man show is quite on that radar, but still quite interesting to see how Marvel's television strategy is at least changing a little bit here. Although we are not here to discuss television and film, we're here to discuss my very favorite thing, and that would be comic books. My name is Arakko Braddock. I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. Man, we had a stellar run of comic books. This week, I actually got the chance to catch up on Jed McKay's Avengers series, and boy, I think that title has rebounded and just has featured some really excellent characterization. Right now, in terms of the X Men series, the publisher is headed into the raid on Greymalkin storyline. I am so excited to really test all of the individual plot threads and see them all coalesce over into the story. One interesting thing about the raid on Greymalkin story is it's not just one X Men book that's tying into it. There's elements throughout the entire X Men line that are definitely reverberating, but in particular, we have the main adjectiveless X Men series and Uncanny X Men that are tying into the event, both for about 2 issues. So many of the battle lines are starting to be drawn here. I am very, very excited to go ahead and talk about some of these upcoming series. To get things started for today, why don't we just completely shift gears and talk about some of the recent releases coming in from Marvel Comics this past week? I actually want to start things off with a comic book that totally took me by surprise here. Let's go ahead and peek into the latest issue of Marvel's Core Ultimate series. This is Ultimates issue 6. I have been such a big fan with how author Dennis Camp has been following up on the plot threads that Jonathan Hickman seeded over in the Ultimate Invasion storyline. He just continues to add more and more fascinating characters, whether it be the Ultimate She-Hulk, whether it be Hawkeye, the Human Torch as well. There's a huge cast making up this comic book series. Finally, Ultimate 6 does a wonderful job, and by the way, this issue, of course, is drawn by the excellent Juan Frigeri, who recently contributed some amazing work towards Marvel Comics' recent Iron Man series. But really, this issue pits our Ultimates characters against a key member of the Maker's Council, and that would be none other than the Hulk. However, this issue carries a really big twist involving the Hulk. In fact, it's actually going to lead to a bit of spoilers. So anybody who hasn't caught up with the Ultimate series, I'd really encourage you to go back, check out Ultimate Invasion, check out all prior issues of the series, and let's go ahead and get into it here. So Ultimate 6 opens with Iron Lad introducing the concept of a rescue mission to the team, as it appears that some of the members of the Maker's Council are hiding some refugee, super-powered individuals. So finally, we get to see our massive Ultimates roster of heroes assemble for the first time. We have characters like Sif, Human Torch, She-Hulk, a lot of them we just mentioned a little bit earlier. But this is one of the big moments and one of the big formations that we get to see everybody really introduced to the core cast after having so many issues of build-up. While this issue doesn't quite pit our full team against, the Maker or each member of the Maker's Council, they're still going up against the devastating Hulk, who's been seeded in so many previous Ultimate comics, including titles like Ultimate Invasion. However, the Hulk is hiding a massive, massive secret, as he's actually the Iron Fist, and our team of Ultimates find themselves in the world of Kunlun over in the issue. Man, I hope I pronounced that right, chat. Let me know if I got that wrong there. So, watching our brand new assembled Ultimates characters battle the Ultimate Hulk, who has the power of Iron Fist, is so epic. There's so many great fight scenes and splash pages over from Juan Frigeri as an artist. Also, I love how much characterization was implemented in seeing She-Hulk fight against Hulk. I don't want to quite spoil how that sequence ends, but it is absolutely devastating for the core cast of heroes. I feel like Ultimates as a series has found so many ways to reinvent itself within each and every issue. I cannot wait to see where the series is going next. I can't wait to see some of these other Ultimate series start coalescing into each other and just opening up towards like a more cohesive crossover that's going to see our entire roster fight against the Maker. Really, really exciting stuff towards this latest issue of Ultimates. Very happy to talk about some of the recent released comic books over this past week, too. Let's go ahead and keep the ball rolling here with a look at the most recent issue of Avengers. I feel like there's a ton of things to say about Avengers. When this series first was published, I was really, really excited to see what Jed McKay and CF Villa were going to bring over to the story. The opening storyline over with Kang the Conqueror and characters from the Meridian Diadem, I believe that's what they're called, were just absolutely really, really intriguing. But as we got a little bit deeper over to this Avengers run, I felt like we were at a standstill in terms of the plot, and I really wanted to see more plot threads to start opening up in the series. Thankfully, though, I think this latest issue of Avengers does a really fantastic job following up on some of those previous characters and stories while opening this book up a little bit farther. Also, I really want to go ahead and mention the artist on this issue, Fareed Karami. I'm not super familiar with his work, but oh my God, it was amazing. This issue is really emotionally deep for the character of T'Challa, the Black Panther, and I felt like Karami was able to capture so many of those really fantastic facial expressions to really create a really engaging and just interesting issue of Avengers. Let's talk about the plot over in this series a little bit as well. So, over in this issue of Avengers, a Storm recently joined the team in the absence of their main Thunder God, being none other than the God of Thunder, the Odinson himself, leaving this roster of Avengers. So, we got Storm to step up over from the X-Men. This is really interesting because in the main X-Men series from Moreva Ayadeli and Lucas Wernick, Storm is actually running for Congress. So I feel like Storm is really trying to protect her like public relations image and is probably trying to stretch out and adapt to as many teams as possible. However, one of the members of the current Avengers squad definitely had a hard time reacting to this member of the team joining the fray, and that was none other than the ex-husband of Storm, T'Challa. So T'Challa tries to go into the Meridian Diadem, which was introduced by the foes who were first introduced over to the core Avengers series, and he goes undercover on a rescue mission. In the previous issue of Avengers, Chapter 19, a lot of readers thought, as well as Jed MacKay sort of introducing this concept in the story, that the reason why Black Panther was going on this rescue mission was to try and avoid his ex-wife being Storm. However, I think this issue comes to a much different conclusion and actually references the incredible work that John Ridley did over with Black Panther. I don't want to say anything more about what T'Challa experiences, but I do want to introduce just some of the elements that he faces in the Meridian Diadem this issue. So very early into the comic book tale, we get to see these characters of Harno and Ruatli. They're trying to escape through the Zone 14 Green. And these characters are just trying to scavenge around and get food. We really learn that the conditions in the Meridian Diadem are just incredibly harrowing. However, these characters of Harno and Ruatli really need the Meridian Diadem because they're unable to leave based on the needs from that specific habitat. So we really get to see T'Challa try and rise up and save these characters from so many threats surrounding them. There's so many interesting sequences of stealth, and watching T'Challa just sort of march through and take out so many of these characters and rightfully save the scavengers of the Meridian Diadem is just a great way for Jed MacKay to really explore so much of the characterization behind T'Challa. I want to go ahead and read T'Challa's final quotations in the comic book written by Jed MacKay because it really just sort of struck me on a visceral level and really caught so many of my emotions towards John Ridley's really amazing run in the series. T'Challa says, "I was born for this, but the kingdom I was born to defend has rejected me. In the face of that, I must wonder, am I merely creating a new kingdom for myself here?" Yeah, this is absolutely just really, really sad stuff for T'Challa. He states, "The kingdom I was born to defend has rejected me." It's really interesting because there was a ton of pushback towards T'Challa being exiled from Wakanda by a lot of the readers in the previous run, but I feel like Jed MacKay has used this continuity just as a weapon to create a really fascinating character-based comic book tale that really sets up the future of Black Panther and this comic book series in a really engaging way. I feel like Jed MacKay is really introducing some very interesting character-focused stories in this comic book. Recently, in the Marvel Solicits, we got the preview that Jed MacKay is actually bringing the character of Black Cat over to the Avengers. This is going to be so much fun. Jed MacKay worked with the Black Cat character for such a long time and had a really groundbreaking character-defining run. based off of what we've seen with the Black Panther T'Challa character, I feel like we're in for some really interesting character work when the Black Cat issue of Avengers comes very, very soon. Also, in each and every issue of the Avengers run, there's been some stellar art from everybody from Fareed Karami to the initial artist CF Via over on the series. So, really encourage you to check out maybe the past 3 to 4 issues of Avengers, and I'm really hoping that Jed McKay will really be able to implement either some strong plotting or really interesting character stories that are going to get me interested in reading almost each issue of this really interesting series. Okay, that was the fantastic Avengers 20. Let's see what's next on the agenda. So we have been endlessly teasing the Raid on Greymalkin crossover for Marvel Comics. We are not quite there yet with X-Men, the adjectiveless X-Men issue 7, but this was yet another absolutely tremendous comic book issue written by, you guessed it, Jed McKay, featuring artwork from Neto Diaz. I really want to single out Jed McKay as a creator. He had 2 wonderful Marvel comic books that were published in the last couple of weeks. I think they were both absolutely tremendous. I feel like his presence at Marvel is growing exponentially, and he has such a great recent back catalog of comics to really support that. Comic Lore, welcome over to the stream. Fantastic to have you aboard. Let's go ahead and talk about the wonderful X-Men issue 7. So when this adjectiveless X-Men series first kicked off here, it felt like we missed a little bit of the continuity and plot setting up this series. Thankfully, though, Jed McKay really winds things back over in this comic book tale and sets up a ton of characterization between both Magneto and Cyclops in the comic book. It really feels like Cyclops is feeling really dejected from some of the final events of Krakoa. I love how each comic book in the X-Men's From the Ashes line has done such a great job referencing at least 1 or 2 plot threads from the Krakoa line to just make the X-Men comics feel, I would argue, more cohesive than like anything else I've read in the Big Two line. Maybe except for Ultimate Comics, just to be a little bit fair as well. Okay, so this comic book also intersperses this character of Piper Cobb, who was introduced last issue, that seemingly has this mysterious tie over to a Sentinel. Back and forth, this issue really flashes back between these 2 plot threads in the past and present, and readers get even more implemented towards all of the interesting ways that caused the X-Men to really come together and reference this key storyline in the X-Men continuity called the Iron Knight. By the way, Afro-Seth, fantastic to have you over in chat. Good to see you aboard. Also, during the Iron Knight over for the X-Men characters, this Sentinel, very close to the X-Men's factory in Merle, Alaska, just came alive and really caused an epic showdown between Magneto, Cyclops, and this mysterious robot, just wreaking havoc over for the X-Men property. Now, I want to give a little bit of a spoiler warning before we continue. I don't think we can really talk about this comic book in that much more depth without talking a little bit more about some of the plot implications. This issue of X-Men actually winds things down and teases readers that anybody who went through the X-Men's Resurrection Protocol during Krakoa may actually have some lasting effects, some lasting sickness in the series. This causes a ton of complications over with Cyclops because he's been resurrected from the Resurrection Protocol in Krakoa, I don't know, at least more than once. I believe Magneto or Cyclops also talks about the fact that Quentin Quire has been resurrected too. I guess the mysterious part about the sickness right now is why it's causing Magneto to age a lot quicker than some of the other X-Men characters, but I love the fact that we have this like burning plot thread that's going to maybe affect so many of the core X-Men on this adjectiveless series that's really going to have big implications for the plot moving forward. This issue also did a great job setting up Greymalkin with a really interesting scene involving the character of Beast that sets up the preview for the next issue. Also, over in the comic book tale, we got a hint that there may be more to come with the character of Piper Cobb too in the last couple panels. When we first ended the comic book tale, we thought that Piper wasn't a mutant, but the final couple panels in the issue definitely suggest otherwise. So I definitely think Jed McKay has done a great job assembling so many of the plot mechanics over in X-Men, and I can't wait to see them collide over with Uncanny X-Men as soon as Greymalkin kicks off here. Let's go ahead and keep the X-Men fun going and preview the next issue of the main Uncanny X-Men series. So here's a cover for the upcoming Uncanny X-Men 5, written by Gail Simone, featuring artwork from the phenomenal David Marquez. I feel like we actually saw this comic book cover a few months ago, so it's really interesting to finally get a look over at the interiors behind the comic book. Also, I think this sword lends a great sense of perspective over to the page too. David Marquez definitely draws a battle ready and a worn gambit that's really, really interesting to look at here too. Okay, this one is coming in over from Adventures in Port Haste. Let's go ahead and preview the solicit for the issue. The brutal conclusion to the Red Wave storyline is here. The Uncanny X-Men face an unstoppable force of evil and Death, who reveals a shocking secret. But they may not survive long enough to face it. Will the next generation of young mutants stand by Rogue and her team or join the other side? I love these design pages for the X-Men comics. I feel like when we first saw them in From the Ashes, it took me a while to really just grow and adapt to them. But now that we're several months into the From the Ashes line, I think they are really tremendous. The design in the issue is handled by Jay Bowen. Also, we have colors from Matthew Wilson and letters from VC's Clayton Cowles. So this is our first page over from David Marquez in the issue. This is so beautiful. There's just so much texture here. In this tale, we really get to see the character of Rogue reflect on some of her recent PTSD from the fight that she had from Dr. Karina Ellis's villainous Sarah Gaunt. It was really interesting watching characters like Wolverine have to assist some of the other X-Men characters in recent issues, and just some of the results from her battle with Sarah look absolutely devastating. However, in the final panel on the page, we get a hint that this might not actually be real, with one of the X-Men characters saying, "Get up, Anna Marie, get up." The next page really zooms out and shows the rest of our X-Men cast hosted in the Haven House over in Louisiana. We have Wolverine, who's currently holding a bandage over both of his eyes for sight. And we have some of the Outliers characters in the final panel being Deathdream and Jitter. I really like how Deathdream and Jitter are drawn just a little bit differently, a little bit more animated and effervescent than some of our older X-Men over in the comic book Tale 2. Also, the Outliers characters are only a couple months old in terms of Marvel's continuity. Seeing them join up against the X-Men and presumably battle some of the forces that are setting up the Greymalkin storyline is also just so interesting to read. I think David Marquez has a beautiful sense of perspective is captured on this page. I love how the panel is just slightly tinted or tilted just to bring out as much emotion as possible. Really interesting stuff over in the next issue of Marvel's Uncanny X-Men series. I love how really Gail Simone and Jed McKay are taking like every single plot thread that they've set up so far and just weaving them together to build as much conflict as possible for our X-Men characters. That said, I'd say the one exception to the rule right now is just the fact that it looks like Jed McKay isn't ready to give up what's happening over with 3K and the mysterious Cassandra Nova quite yet. It looks like he's holding some of those pieces a little bit closer over to his chest here. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we will be right back to talk a little bit more about the upcoming 8 Deaths of Spider-Man series. All right, we have been talking about this comic book series for weeks, if not months here. Finally, Marvel's Eight Deaths of Spider Man is going to be published this upcoming Wednesday. One really interesting thing to note about that is Marvel isn't rewinding the clock and just relaunching The Amazing Spider Man. They're keeping the same numbering from the Zeb Wells series. Also, I don't think I mentioned this on stream yet. The way that Zeb Wells' run ended with issue 60 over with John Romita Jr. in the core Amazing Spider Man series was phenomenal. Excuse me. We actually have a video up on the channel counting down my favorite 8 comic books from Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider Man. I'd really encourage you to go ahead and check that one out if you haven't seen it. Zeb Wells had a great Amazing Spider Man run. It was actually a ton of fun for me to go back and look through some of the earlier entries in his run. It felt like so many of the plot threads started to coalesce as his run really wound down. Particularly, I think the Gang War storyline was really influential to so many of the long term plot threads, as well as the character of Ben Riley. One interesting thing also to touch on here is just the fact that author Joe Kelly is a sort of colleague of Zeb Wells. These two writers both collaborated on the Brand New Day era of Amazing Spider Man, and Zeb Wells is passing the torch over to Joe Kelly. I assume they probably have a pretty strong relationship with each other, so I'm wondering how they're going to maybe set up some of those plot threads and go back to what, Zeb Wells was doing. Right now, The Eight Deaths of Spider Man is a pretty big 180 from everything Wells established, but I still think it's a really fascinating story. Let's go ahead and set things up here before the article does it for us. As a result of the recent Blood Hunt storyline at Marvel Comics, also from the incredibly busy Jed MacKay and the wonderful X-Men founder of Pepe Larraz, that comic book, as a result of some of the final stages, actually introduced the character of Doctor Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme over to the Marvel Universe. Doctor Doom was supposed to borrow the identity from Stephen Strange really briefly in the comic book tale, but of course, Doctor Doom is Doctor Doom, and he ended up actually keeping it in the story. So one of Doctor Doom's first acts as the Sorcerer Supreme, aside from saving the Marvel Universe from a vampire invasion, is actually to select Spider-Man to do some of his dirty work for him, as Spider-Man is facing an upcoming covenant where he's going to be battling some of these Sidorak characters who actually established some of the technology for the Juggernaut character. So there's so many interesting plot threads, so many big swings that Joe Kelly is taken with the Amazing Spider-Man property. Also, I haven't mentioned this enough, but Joe Kelly isn't the only writer on this comic book. We also have Justina Ireland. Ed McGuinness is contributing some of the artwork, as well as Gleb Melnikov from the very wonderful Batman and Robin run that we covered pretty extensively in terms of the first few issues. So we have one all-star creative team passing the torch to another all-star creative team. Let's see what everybody has in store for the Eight Deaths of Spider-Man. This article is coming in from comicbook.com's Tim Adams. So here's a look at the Amazing Spider-Man's issue 61 cover. I love the sense of perspective, and also the fact that this comic book cover is actually really slowly integrating readers into Doctor Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme, really introducing Spider-Man to the Covenant and his brand new suit. Some of the most recent covers actually show Spider-Man in his full suit as well. So one thing you immediately can pick up from taking one glance at the first interior page of Amazing Spider-Man 61 is that Joe Kelly is a pretty wordy writer. There's a ton of text on the page, but actually each comic book text introduces a really fascinating idea that Joe Kelly really introduces later on in the comic book tale. So even though there's a ton of writing on the page, I think reading some of this prose in depth actually introduces some payoff for the series. One great example to prove what I'm talking about is this money that's really addressed to Aunt May from the Feast Corporation. That concept is actually set up a little bit later on in the story too. This page is super visceral over from Ed McGuinness. I love the fact that we have Amazing Spider-Man kind of leaping in that signature pose in the background of the camera. Just amazing sense of perspective and great, beautiful art here. We have a big double page spread over from Ed McGuinness, introducing his Amazing Spider Man to the tale. This also sets up the relationship between Peter Parker and the bystander that he's saving in the comic book called Kevin, as well as introducing the villain making up the first couple pages of the comic book, being Burnout. One of my big questions about this comic book that I wasn't able to answer in some of my extensive research is if Burnout has some character relationship with the character of Speedball over at Marvel. I feel like they boast some sort of resemblance here. This page in particular features a really interesting cutaway to what's happening with Peter Parker trying to save Kevin in the present versus establishing some of his supporting cast in the background. One of, I think, the big disappointments of Amazing Spider-Man 60 from Zeb Wells was the fact that we didn't get a check-in with Peter Parker and his long-term friend in that series, Randy Robertson. Thankfully, though, Amazing Spider-Man 61 picks things up right where we left off and actually features Randy and Peter catching up. This is juxtaposed really nicely again versus Peter Parker saving Kevin and battling the character of Burnout in the background too. Plus, Joe Kelly is also following up on the relationship Zeb Wells was able to implement into the series with Peter Parker and his love interest Shay. So it looks like these two may not be on the best of terms, and Peter Parker is once again leaving dates early as soon as possible. But it's great to see so much cohesion between the two different Spider-Man runs here. Also, we learn the mysterious plot details behind the cash envelope that Aunt May handed to Peter. It looks like she needed him to deposit some money for her feast shelter too. This page actually shows Peter actually trying to save the character of Kevin before running into the character of Burnout, who disappears before their fight is seemingly done. Spider-Man is really wondering why Burnout disappeared so quickly, and all of that is answered on the next page when Doctor Doom actually makes his face really known across this comic book tale and sets up the idea that Peter Parker is going to have to battle this really interesting covenant moving forward. Let's see what Doctor Doom has to say over to Peter. Your meager services are required at the summons of Earth's Sorcerer Supreme. Doom, the dictator of Latveria, got a magical glow-up when he tricked Doctor Strange into passing him the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme. Makes my skin crawl, but there's not a thing anyone can do about it. Agreed. Kevin, seeing him pop up like this makes my bladder clench. It also makes me mad. So this is probably the second time that Doctor Doom has encountered Peter Parker. In Zeb Wells' final issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Joe Kelly actually had a story where he was able to introduce Doctor Doom over to Peter Parker as Spider-Man 2. Really phenomenal stuff here setting up the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. I feel like Joe Kelly and Ed McGuinness have a great working relationship that's a little bit similar to Zeb Wells. Based on some of these previous pages, it feels like the tone that Zeb Wells established in the comic book is definitely intact. Moving forward, I think the one thing to look out for is definitely some of the prose and dialogue. I feel like a lot of it adds a ton of perspective, but I don't know if all of it is really essential to the story. This was also one of my big takeaways from Joe Kelly's run over on the final issue of Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider-Man with Mark Buckingham. There was a lot of prose that probably could have been cut down and would have resulted in a better comic book. Still, this is really an exciting first couple of pages, and I've got a really good feeling about where Joe Kelly and his collaborators are headed, including Ed McGuinness, in the future of the 8 Deaths of the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man storyline over at Marvel Comics. Okay, let's see what we have to touch on next. Let's go ahead and explore one of our final previews for this stream. This one is really interesting because it has a ton of plot detail and tie-in with the Adjectiveless X-Men series that we spent so much time talking about on stream. Quick thank you over to Comic Book Resources for providing this preview of the series. And let's go ahead and jump into Marvel Comics' upcoming solo series for the character of Quanin Psylocke. So this one actually is kind of a spin-off of the main X-Men series because Quanin, the character of Psylocke, has had such a big presence there. We really got to see her establish a relationship with Grey Crow in a previous issue of the Adjectiveless X-Men series as she got to battle across the character, really psychically with the character of Quentin Quire. So this issue is actually written by Alyssa Wong, featuring some writing over from some artwork from Vincenzo Caratu. Caratu recently contributed some amazing interior work over on the Iceman series from Marvel. I'm so happy to see him taking on like a really big profile comic book like Psylocke. Alyssa Wong is a creator who have really enjoyed their work in the past. I believe Alyssa Wong was the writer behind the Spirit World comic book at DC. That book was so wonderful. I feel like some of the elements of the main character of Xanthi Zoe are a little bit similar to Psylocke. So I feel like Wong's perspective on the comic book definitely is interesting here. Also, let's go ahead and see how Psylocke is going to spin out of this adjectiveless X-Men series and really headline her own comic book. Once again, we have a beautiful design page introduced from the from the designer of Jay Bowen. Also, this issue features colors from Sir Cifuentes Sujo and VC's Ariana Mayer. So this first page is absolutely striking for me. It was so interesting seeing somebody besides like Neto Diaz and Ryan Stegman draw the main adjectiveless X-Men characters. I feel like the effect is so much different. I love Karatu's work. I'd love to see him work with Jed Nikkei on an issue of the main series. Towards the first couple pages here, we have the X-Men characters wondering where Psylocke is over in the series. She ends up showing up in the last couple panels and states, "My flight from Palmdale was almost canceled due to the blizzard." Quentin says, "From what?" "Really? That garbage fire of a town? Cyclops, what? Psylocke, what were you doing in Palmdale?" I love the reaction shot here from Vincenzo Caratu. Also, some of the color work in the background from Sir Cifuentes Sujo really brings out a lot of the emotion behind the series too. We learn what Psylocke was doing in Palmdale, California. It appears she was on a rescue mission that the X-Men have seemingly embarked on in so many previous issues. There's been this huge plot thread in the main X-Men comics teasing the idea that some mysterious group is causing some adult X-Men to activate their mutant gene maybe before it's ready. I'm wondering if any of those plot threads are going to come together in this Psylocke issue or if she's embarking on a different mission. That being said, this is yet another really beautiful page from Karatu. The fact that Psylocke is like twisted upside down, shooting some of these guards and actually engaging telepathically, also incredibly arresting and visceral. This next page is also incredibly visceral too. I think that's going to be the word that really can be applied to so many of the pages here. Seeing the speed traces with Psylocke going all across the comic book, fighting psychically as well as physically in the tale, just shows how strong she is as an X-Men character. Also, we have Psylocke introduced to the character of Mila Acker. She says, "But you are a mutant. My dad hates mutants." And Psylocke says, "He's not the one I'm rescuing." Once again on this page, we have a really strong reaction shot in the final couple panels. Also, I'm loving the perspective and just this panel bleed that artist Vincenzo Caratu lends to the book too. Finally, we have Psylocke saving the character of Mila Acker and seemingly erasing the identities of her mysterious pursuers across the comic book. She says, "No one here is dead, but they won't remember any of this, and neither will you." So there you go. That is our preview over from the upcoming Psylocke series. I love how this comic book really establishes the character of Quanin as a part of the adjectiveless X-Men series, and then goes and spins it off in its own entirely new direction. Okay, that's actually going to go ahead and do it over for our previews and reviews today. It looks like the rest of our stream is really going to be devoted to fleshing out some recent news over at Marvel, especially because we haven't been streaming as much. There's a couple things that we missed that I'm really, really excited to talk about. All right, this first story is just incredibly important to me as a comic book reader. One of my favorite things, one of my favorite comic books that Marvel has published across the past couple decades has been none other than Young Avengers. Marvel's editor in chief, CB Cebulski, is seemingly teasing the fact that the publisher is returning to the property in 2025. Marvel has only published to this day like two separate volumes of Young Avengers. We had the phenomenal Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung run. Also, the second volume of the series featured Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. So, all incredible creative teams. I can't wait to see who's going to be the next creative team over on Young Avengers. Let's learn a little bit about the roster and what Marvel's editor in chief, CB Cebulski, has to say about this upcoming team of heroes. By the way, this one is over from Tim Adams at comicbook.com. Marvel's editor in chief has confirmed that 2025 will see the Young Avengers reunite. The topic of the Young Avengers has been one on the minds of Marvel fans recently, with Agatha all along introducing Wiccan. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has slowly brought this stable of heroes to the forefront in TV shows and movies post Avengers Endgame, with rumors that a Young Avengers project is only a matter of time. You can't have a Young Avengers series or movie in the MCU without a comic to go along with it, which is why Marvel is already working towards making that happen. I guess one exciting thing about Marvel's film and television projects as it currently stands is the publisher right now is seemingly scraping like the bottom of the barrel over at Marvel and is finally really implementing some of my favorite series like Young Avengers. I am really hoping that in the television adaptation, they do a really strong job and just show the full potential of what this property has to offer. Hero Mode Podcast, good to see you in chat. How are you doing today? CB Cebulski, editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, confirmed we'll see the Young Avengers next year in the Marvel Universe while speaking to a crowd at the Tokyo Osaka Comic-Con. I can break some special news here. The Young Avengers will be reuniting in 2025 in Marvel Comics. There have been two Young Avengers teams, but now we're deciding which characters, for natural story reasons, who are going to join the new Young Avengers team. Kate Hawkeye, Patriot, Hulkling, Wiccan, who is going to join, you'll see in 2025. Man, one thing about this that is really disappointing to me is the fact that in Big Two comic books, some of the creative team can't choose the roster of heroes they're working with. I feel like, the reason for characters being on a team really has to do with the overall plot and tone of the series. And it'd be really nice if, the creative team got full control of the property to really grab any characters they wanted from Marvel's roster to create the best comic book possible. To be fair, though, it's hard to imagine a Young Avengers team without Kate Hawkeye, Patriot, Hulkling, or Wiccan. Who are the Young Avengers? Well, we know who the Young Avengers are, but let's see what Tim Adams has to say about it. The Young Avengers were created by writer Alan Heinberg and artist Jim Chung following the events of Avengers Disassembled. Man, that's probably one of the best things to come out of Avengers Disassembled. With the Avengers disbanded, the Young Avengers stepped onto the scene to replace Earth's mightiest heroes. With Young Avengers 1 debuting in April 2005. God, I can't believe it's been that long. That is insane. It's almost been 20 years. My God. Man. To be fair, I was way too young to read the original Young Avengers series when it was first published. I think I probably caught up to it like 10 years after the fact. But I still loved what I read, of course. The original roster had Iron Lad, Patriot, Hawkeye is Kate Bishop, Stature, Cassie Lang is Guardian Wiccan, and Hulkling, with Vision serving as a mentor to the team. As much as I love the Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung run of Young Avengers, it is really the Kieran Gillen run that has really stuck in my mind for such a long time with Jamie McKelvey. Many of the original heroes, including Wiccan, Hulkling, Hawkeye, have returned and were joined by Kid Loki, America Chavez, Speed Prodigy, and Marvel Boy. This has become the team most Young Avengers fans call their favorite. Okay, they totally got that right on the money there. This team is way more interesting. I wish Marvel Comics did more with the Kid Loki character to really set up that plot thread and really introduce, Gillen's Young Avengers. America Chavez, really interesting character whose presence has really been bolstered. I think thanks to, in large part, to this run specifically. I feel like that's the big reason why a lot of readers are so fond of America Chavez as a character. Speed, also interesting. Prodigy is finally getting his time in the limelight over with NYX. Colin Kelly, Jackson Lansing, Francesco Mortarino have done a wonderful job setting up so many plot threads for that character and making David Aline Prodigy feel like a core member of the X-Men property as it currently stands. Man, Marvel Boy had a great personality. Would love to see him show up in the on-screen version of the Avengers team too. There have been several rumors regarding the Young Avengers. Man, there's so many ads on comicbook.com. There have been several rumors regarding Young Avengers over the years, especially with potential candidates popping up across different Marvel TV shows and movies. For example, we had Kate Bishop in Hawkeye, Stinger/Stature in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, America Chavez in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Wiccan in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and Miss Marvel in her self-titled Disney Plus series and the Marvels, where she looked to be assembling the Young Avengers. Man, you know what? I totally forgot about that. Come, I totally forgot about that Kamala Khan scene towards the end of what was it, the Marvels. I really think the tone on that was a little bit too light versus what they could have accomplished in that scene. I feel like they definitely wasted some of the overall potential from Young Avengers, and I hope that the actual show has a more serious tone versus what Kamala was introducing towards the end of that story. This is an instance of Marvel Comics and the MCU working in harmony, with the comics making sure Young Avengers has a presence with rumored Young Avengers MCU projects in the works. CB Cebulski didn't say if the Young Avengers would star in their own series, but at the very least, we should expect to see them start. We should expect to start seeing them inside the comics heading into 2025. If we don't get an ongoing series for Young Avengers, I feel like we should absolutely revolt. We definitely need to see a new volume of that series. It's been a long time since Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey signed off on their final issue. Also, I'm so happy to see this referenced here. I feel like I've talked to so many friends and family members about how the Young Avengers are assembling across like so many of the disparate Marvel television and movies. But they didn't believe me because it took so much time to get these characters assembled together. It's really going to be cathartic as we finally get to see Marvel introduce the Young Avengers characters on the big screen. All right, that is going to be our story about the brand new Young Avengers series. Let's see what else Marvel has in store this past week. I cannot believe we didn't cover this. We love talking about the Ultimate Comics here on the stream. We talk about Ultimate X-Men exhaustively. We talk about the main Ultimate series also exhaustively. But one thing we haven't discussed yet is Ultimate Universe 1 Year In. This was actually published on October 30th from Marvel Comics' main website. Actually, you know what we're going to do here? We're going to open this in a separate screen so you can see the cover while we are talking about the story. I think the artist Jonas Scharf accomplished so much at Marvel during the Dark X-Men comic book from author Steve Fox. It's great to see him introduced to a really big, important plot series over from Marvel. All right, so once again, this one was published October 30th from Marvel. We also, in addition to Jonas Scharf, have a creative team from Ultimate Wolverine being Chris Condon and Alessandro Capuccio. Let's talk about this brand new one shot here. Today, fans can check out all new covers for this highly anticipated issue and get a sneak peek at both stories, each of which adds a major new player in the Ultimate Universe tapestry, Wolverine and Nick Fury. Man, that's right. Believe it or not, it looks like we haven't had Nick Fury really introduced towards the core Ultimate Marvel Universe yet. Afro SF says, can't wait for this book. Me too. Very excited about what this creative team has in store. Among the covers are a group of variants where regular Ultimate Series cover artists Marco Cicchetto, Peach Momoko, and Daikruan traded off and brought their skills to characters from each other's series. Also included is a terrifying depiction of the Maker by comic book legend Frank Miller. I love how the Maker's presence seems to be rising in terms of Marvel's overall publishing line. Good lord, having a Frank Miller Maker story just blows my mind, the idea and potential of that comic book. We also have an epic connecting cover from Jose Maria Casanovas. We're actually going to talk about that. I saw that. That was amazing. And that's going to run across all the Ultimate titles. And there's going to be a spoiler variant cover spotlighting Ultimate Wolverine's first appearance as the character's future series artist, Alessandro Capuccio. My God, we can't say enough good things about Alessandro Capuccio. His work on Moon Knight is amazing. I feel like he's overlooked in terms of some of the artists over at Marvel. I feel like his work should be talked about on the level of Declan Shalvey. It is so, so beautiful. If you haven't checked out Jed McKay's Moon Knight run, read it from the very beginning. I don't think you'll be disappointed. In never-before-seen preview pages, glimpse behind the curtain as Nick Fury's role in the Maker's world order is revealed. With their master's return imminent, the Maker's Council convened to discuss the sudden rise of superheroes determined to bring hope to their corrupt universe. I feel like the Maker is starting to become the boogeyman in all of Marvel's comics. We have so many disparate series referencing the Maker's Council, just divided all across each Ultimate Marvel series. I wish Marvel's core publishing line was as cohesive as this. It feels like the stakes in the Ultimate Universe are so, so high. Since the Ultimate Universe began, readers have learned more and more about its twisted origins. Ooh. And now Dennis Camp and Jonas Scharf reveal some of their darkest truths yet. Plus, meet the Maker's ultimate weapon, the Winter Soldier, in a preview to Chris Condon and Alessandro Capuccio's Ultimate Wolverine, the 5th ongoing series launching in the Ultimate line this January. Oh, we actually have some preview pages. Let me go ahead and get those up on the screen right now. Let's see. Okay, I think this is going to work. Here we have a look at a massive, I believe, shield ship over from Jonas Scharf, setting up a ton of detail behind the series. This is beautiful. Here's an interior page showing the character of the Maker in the background, maybe influencing Nick Fury and some of the rest of these heroes. Plus, we have a glimpse at the ultimate version of Howard the Duck over at Marvel Comics that also looks like a lot of fun. I'm loving the scratchy backgrounds that Jonas Scharf was able to bring towards the really dark pages of his really interesting Dark X-Men run. Seeing some of these same elements implemented towards the really noir and dark Maker's Council is incredibly arresting on the page. I love how we get to see so many members of the council assembled before Nick Fury. So as we can see from this preview, it feels like Nick Fury may be pulling the strings behind this operation. Oh, we get a really interesting twisted version of his origin, maybe manipulated by the character of the Maker. It's interesting to see how these characters are so much different from their core counterparts And the main reason why is because the maker had something to do with their development, thanks to all of his machinations involving time travel. Once again, this final panel with Jonas Sharf's Nick Fury seemingly having some sort of realization is just beautiful. Okay, it looks like we have a cover from Alessandro Cappuccio teasing the future of Ultimate Wolverine. It looks like from the interior sensibilities of the art, we're getting a lot of the same dark and noir feelings as the Moon Knight run. This is fantastic for me. I feel like, being the Winter Soldier character, being the right hand of the maker, the Ultimate Wolverine comic book is going to be super, super dark. And I'm glad to see Chris Condon and Alessandro Cappuccio evoking that tone in like one interior page alone. I'm interested to hear more about who these mysterious characters are up top as well. Wow, this is also interesting. We have an Alessandro Cappuccio drawn page featuring some of the members of the Makers Council. One of the most horrifying aspects about the Makers Council right now is the fact that Magic is part of them. I want to know what Magic's motivations are. I want to know what's going on in the background of Colossus's mind too. Omega Red makes a lot more sense to be on the Makers Council, to be fair. The sense of transitions and like these scratchy backgrounds are the reason why I really love Cappuccio as an artist. Great storytelling here. Okay, I think there's so much to be excited about with this Ultimate Universe 1 Year In series, as well as Marvel's upcoming Ultimate Wolverine series. Oh, wow. I was able to find more of that artwork that they were talking about right now. Okay, let me see how this looks before we put it up on the screen real quick. Okay. Afro SF, what do you think of Viper in Ultimate X-Men? I love Viper in Ultimate X-Men. I think they're great. I love that book. It's wonderful. Okay, I didn't see this. This is beautiful. Check out this really interesting Lionel Yu drawn cover over for Ultimate 6. Seeing the Hulk and some of the immortal weapons assembled against the rest of the very, very newly assembled Ultimates team is so beautiful. Lionel Yu is so accurate in terms of perspective. I always like seeing his work, but it's a special treat seeing it here because so many of these aspects are new to Marvel's continuity, especially as we have the Iron Fist Hulk in the background of the series too. Really, really phenomenal stuff. I'd love to see more like big Marvel artists with a huge presence in comics draw beautiful covers like this. This piece of artwork is so, so crazy. It's illustrated by Jose Maria Casanovas, and it unites the entire Ultimate Comics universe. We're going to look at each individual cover one by one by one. Okay, I thought this image was going to be a lot bigger. Give me just 1 second, and I'm going to find a version of it that is bigger. I know it exists. Marvel connecting covers. Okay, here's one from Marvel's own. This one is really, really big. This one is really, really big. This one might even be too big. My goodness. I think it'll be okay. Okay, so here's a preview of the Ultimate X-Men version of Jose Maria's excellent Ultimate Universe connecting cover. We get to see the characters like the newly introduced Psylocke as well as Armor, Hisako Ichiki, and Maystorm. I don't know who this character is in the background, but I love the symbolism, and I think it's really cool too to see a different artist take on some of these characters as opposed to Peach Momoko's beautiful work in the main series. Okay, and then this is the cover for Ultimates. This one also references continuity that is really, really new to the entire Marvel line, as we have the character of America Chavez, Ultimate America Chavez, joining in battle behind Thor as well as Iron Lad in the tail. Let's see, did they sneak any other characters in the background here? I don't see anybody I know. Okay, it looks like these are some of the artwork behind the upcoming Ultimate Spider-Man series. We have Kraven the Hunter over in the background. Spider-Man is leaping into battle. We can see Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin up top here. And here's a look at some of the characters behind Black Panther. I know this is the villain behind the series right now. And then we have Killmonger and Storm as well in the series. Okay, I'm wondering if this could be the Ultimate Universe 1 year in cover. I'm seeing the villainous Ultimate Nick Fury going up against Omega Red and Colossus. I wonder why they're engaged in combat, because I feel like each member of the team should be on the same side. Oh, we even have Magic going into battle with the Maker's Council as well. And we have none other than the Maker himself on the cover to Ultimate Wolverine. I was wondering how Marvel was going to slot the Maker into one of the individual covers, but having him be featured on the Wolverine issue definitely makes a lot of sense, because Wolverine is the Maker's sort of right-hand man and the new Winter Soldier of the Marvel Comics universe. This work from Jose Maria is amazing. I'd love to see Marvel continue to implement more recent continuity with beautiful and accurate artwork like this. It's just a great sense of nostalgia that never existed. And I think that's actually going to finally conclude our ultimate block of series for the day. Okay, I want to go ahead and close out our stream today with one final news story. This is one that actually happened over New York Comic Con several weeks ago. I have no idea how we missed it. I'm very, very excited to talk about it right now. Let's explore how Eddie Brock becomes Carnage in the future of Marvel's publishing line. This one is coming from Marvel.com. Marvel Comics reveals Eddie Brock's Carnage series at New York Comic Con. Spinning out of Venom War, Charles Soule and Jesus Sai's Eddie Brock's Carnage launches in February. There is so much to talk about already here. Let's start with Charles Soule. Charles Soule is a phenomenal writer in terms of Marvel. One of my big complaints for some of his recent work is that he hasn't really been writing a comic book that I've been super invested in. Thankfully, with Eddie Brock Carnage, that all changes here. Soule wrote the wonderful She-Hulk run over at Marvel Comics. And also, the artist Jesus Saiz is absolutely tremendous. Some of my favorite work dates back to his run on DC's Swamp Thing series, also with none other than Charles Soule, as he was able to evoke so much emotion. This is a creative team that has already worked on a comic book and have proven themselves. I feel like from the very first interior page of Eddie Brock Carnage, we should be in for a really, really good time. I want to hear Marvel talk about how Eddie Brock becomes Carnage, as currently in the main series, he's been trying to save his son across like dozens and dozens of issues of Venom now. It's been really thrilling to watch Eddie's morality become tested again and again and again. So what causes Eddie to kind of tip over the surface and take on the Carnage mantle? Let's go ahead and find out. Just now at the Marvel Comics Spider-Man and His Venomous Friends panel at New York Comic Con, senior editor Jordan D. White, current Venom scribe Al Ewing, and New York Times bestselling author Charles Soule revealed the future of symbiote storytelling. That's right, on this stream today, we are revealing the future of symbiote storytelling. Fans were given a first look at all new Venom and the announcement of the second symbiote ongoing series spinning out of Venom War, that being Eddie Brock Carnage. Launching in February, Eddie Brock Carnage will be written by Soule, known for his acclaimed run on Star Wars, and drawn by Jesus Saiz, following his extraordinary work on recent titles like Captain America and Punisher. I feel like I should be in trouble for forgetting the fact that Jesus Saiz had a recent run over on Captain America. Set in the aftermath of Venom War, the startling saga sees longtime Venom host Eddie Brock operating at the new host of the violent and sadistic Carnage symbiote. The series will interact with the other flagship symbiote title, All New Venom, which sees the Venom symbiote take on a yet to be revealed host. In addition to the core Venom series by Al Ewing, I think one of the really bright spots across the Venom line that, to be honest, I maybe haven't done a great job covering are all the ancillary titles. Toron Grönbeck has written a lot of them, like Venom War, Venomous. Also, I know Toron Grönbeck is writing the main Venom series as Al Ewing takes on the Venom War story. Some of the writing in Venom has been divided previously by writers like Toron Grönbeck and Ram V. So, in addition to Al Ewing kind of charting the course for Eddie Brock really going into a big science fiction series, we also have some of these writers in the background creating stories that really enhance and add to what Al Ewing is doing as a writer. Carnage is someone that has to kill, so Eddie has to feed him deaths. In order for Eddie to be okay with that, the people he feeds Carnage are serial killers, Soule explains, but Carnage is also an addict, and addicts need bigger and bigger highs. Great premise for the series. It's kind of evoking some of the aspects of Dexter, the television series, as kind of harnessed by Eddie's symbiote, being the Carnage symbiote here. Also, another really interesting idea to explore is that it looks like Eddie is trying to be, he's trying to have his morality, really clear in the face of having such a violent symbiote in his possession. So I really feel like the push and pull between Eddie's own morality and this symbiote is really going to fuel a ton of elements behind the series. Carnage right now has had a really interesting storyline. He's been using so many aspects and artifacts of the Marvel Universe to try and become a god. I really wonder how the character of Carnage is going to lose his symbiote and it's going to pass over to Eddie in the near future. I know he's been working in the background with Meridius in terms of the Venom War storyline too. So I'm wondering if this is bad news for the character of Meridius in addition to Clayton Cassidy. I'm having a blast with this, Soule continued. Jesus Saiz wanted to do a horror book. This is his wheelhouse. He loves creepy organic things to draw, and I'm giving him everything he can handle. I love that Soule is writing to the interests of his artist. I feel like that's how you produce some of the most beautiful work in terms of the comic book medium too. The most lethal protector of all. He's been Venom, anti-Venom. He's been the King in Black. Now, Eddie Brock has made his darkest bond yet as he joins with the one and only Carnage. Can he control his new other's endless bloodlust, or will he give himself over to madness and murder? Join Eddie and Carnage on a journey into the darkest parts of the Marvel Universe with bloody death as their only guide. Oh, we have some concept art from Jesus Saiz. Let's take a look at that now. To be honest, this artwork is a little bit surprising. It feels like it's a little bit more retro versus what we usually see from Saiz. I'm wondering if this is just due in part to the fact that we don't have a background, and I'm really wondering what these interior pages are going to look like. We have a cover by Mark Bagley. Man, I don't really think this does a good job advertising what Soule and Saiz are going to bring to this series. I feel like it's going to be a lot more like future oriented versus this really retro looking cover from Bagley. I don't think it's particularly bad though. Okay, I think that's going to go ahead and do it over for the stream today. I want to thank you guys so much for your support over these past couple weeks. We're going to be continuing to stream. I'm going to be continuing to come up with, brand new video ideas that really cover some of the latest comics in ways that are really exciting. I think going forward here, we're going to have some coverage over on Spider-Man 61 in the very near future. We'll also be exploring some of the aftermath of Greymalkin as well. And of course, we will be back next weekend for another really epic stream exploring everything going on in the realm of comics. If you haven't already and you're watching this stream, please subscribe over to the channel and hit the like button over on our stream too. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.